There is a kind of silence that exists between the stars. Not the absence of sound, for sound requires atmosphere, and the void has none to give. This silence is something older, something heavier, the silence of time itself, stretching across distances so vast that light becomes a memory before it arrives. In that silence, civilizations are born. In that silence, they die. And in that silence, the universe keeps no record of their screaming. I have lived long enough to understand this now. My name is Veth Kalen, and I have served the Fessery Concordance for 417 standard cycles. I have watched stars collapse into darkness. I have seen the rise and fall of 17 spacefaring species, their monuments reduced to orbital debris, their languages forgotten by the very cosmos that once carried them. I have drafted treaties that preserved peace for centuries and signed declarations that ended wars before they consumed entire systems. I believed, as my ancestors believed, that the Thessari were eternal. We were the eldest, the first children of the galaxy to look upon the stars and understand them. When other species were still crawling from their oceans, we had already mapped the gravitational currents between galactic arms. When they discovered fire, we were engineering the hearts of suns. We built the first beacon network. We established the conclave of voices. We created the very framework by which civilizations learned to speak to one another across the impossible distances of space. For 9,000 years, we were the architects of galactic order. And in our wisdom, in our ancient and unassailable confidence, we believed we understood the nature of all things, including the small, fragile, impossibly young species that emerged from a pale blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star at the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm. We called them humans. The council laughed. I remember that day with a clarity that has become a wound. 12 cycles ago, when their ambassador first stood before the conclave of voices and requested full membership in the galactic community, the chamber filled with a sound I had not heard in centuries. Genuine, unguarded amusement. The Velanthi representatives clicked their mandibles in patterns of condescension. The Oroveth dimmed their bioluminescence in dismissal. Even the Kreth, who rarely expressed anything at all, allowed their crystalline bodies to chime with what could only be interpreted as mockery. The human ambassador, a woman named Sarah Chen, stood at the center of that laughter and did not move. I was seated in the upper tier, observing as I had observed 1,000 such moments. I watched her face, searching for the anger, the humiliation, the desperate plea for recognition that I had seen in so many young species when confronted with the reality of their insignificance. But her expression never changed. She simply waited, hands clasped before her, until the laughter subsided. "We understand," she said quietly, when silence finally returned. "We will withdraw our request. Thank you for your time." And then she left. No protest, no demands, no impassioned speech about the potential of her people or the injustice of being dismissed. She simply turned, walked through the great doors of the conclave chamber, and disappeared into the corridors beyond. I remember thinking it was strange. I remember feeling for just a moment a small tremor of unease, the instinct of a species that had survived 9 millennia by recognizing patterns others could not see. But I was old, and I was tired, and the Thessery had more important matters to consider than the wounded pride of a species that had only discovered faster-than-light travel 3 centuries prior. We had wars to prevent, crises to manage, the great wheel of galactic civilization to maintain. And so I forgot about Sarah Chen. I forgot about the silence that followed her departure. I did not understand then what that silence meant. The Vrakthen arrived without warning. Even now, I do not fully understand what they are. No species in the Conclave's recorded history had encountered them before. They came from beyond the galactic rim, from the vast and lightless spaces between galaxies, where no star has shone for billions of years. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply appeared at the edge of Thessery space, their ships vast and dark and utterly silent, and they began to consume. The first world they took was Verithsal, a garden planet of 4 billion souls. The Concordance responded with our 5th fleet, 400 warships, the pride of our civilization, armed with weapons that had ended a dozen conflicts before they truly began. The battle lasted 11 minutes. No ships returned. No distress signals escaped. When we sent reconnaissance drones to investigate, they found only debris and the Vrakthen fleet, now larger than before, moving toward the next system. In the cycles that followed, we learned the terrible mathematics of their advance. They did not merely destroy, they harvested. Every world they touched was stripped, not just of life, but of matter itself, converted into raw material for the construction of more ships, more weapons, more of the silent darkness that spread across our space like a stain. We called upon the Conclave. The Velanthi sent 3 armadas. The Vrakthen consumed them in 9 days. The Oriveth deployed their legendary psionic barriers, shields that had held against the fury of collapsing stars. The Vrakthen passed through them as if they were not there. The Kreth, desperate, activated weapons they had kept secret for 6,000 years, devices capable of igniting the nuclear cores of entire planets. The Vrakthen did not slow. World by world, fleet by fleet, the great powers of the galaxy fell. And through it all, the humans were silent. We sent them requests for aid, formal, diplomatic, through the proper channels they had once sought to join. They acknowledged receipt. They offered no response. We sent them warnings, detailed accounts of the Vrakthen advance, projections of their trajectory, evidence that if the galactic core fell, even their distant spiral arm would eventually be reached. They acknowledged receipt. They offered no response. We sent them pleas, abandoning all pretense of superiority, admitting that we had been wrong to dismiss them, begging for whatever assistance they could provide. They acknowledged receipt. They offered no response. And the Vrakthen continued their advance. By the time I stood before the emergency session of the Conclave, the Thessery Concordance had lost 47 worlds. 18 billion of my people were dead or displaced. Our remaining fleets, what few survived, had fallen back to defensive positions around our homeworld, Thessera Prime, where my species had first looked upon the stars and dreamed of understanding them. The chamber that had once held representatives of 34 spacefaring civilizations now echoed with emptiness. 12 species had been entirely consumed. 9 more had fled into the darkness between stars, hoping to escape by abandoning everything they had ever built. Those of us who remained huddled in our seats like survivors of a shipwreck, watching the tide rise toward us.
"We must send an embassy to Earth," I said.
The words hung in the air. Around me, the remaining members of the conclave, the wounded remnants of galactic civilization, stared at me with expressions ranging from confusion to contempt. "The humans?" The Valanthe representative, Counselor Shareth, clicked her mandibles in disbelief. "They are children, Elder Vethkalen. They cannot help us." "They have not responded to any of our communications," added Oraveth Luminary Vast, his bioluminescent patches flickering with exhaustion. "They have made their position clear. They will not join a war that is not their own." "Can you blame them?" The voice was quiet, weary, and it took me a moment to recognize it as my own. We laughed at them. We dismissed them as primitive, insignificant, unworthy of a seat at our table. We told them, in every way we could, that they did not matter. I paused, feeling the weight of those words settle into my bones. Perhaps they simply believed us. "Then what do you propose?" Sheriff demanded. "That we grovel before them? Beg for scraps from a species that has not even existed for a single Thessari lifetime?" "I propose," I said slowly, "that we go to them, not as supplicants, not as rulers demanding tribute. We go as what we have become, the dying remnants of a civilization that was too proud to see what was coming, seeking any chance of survival." I looked around the chamber, at the empty seats, at the fear in every face that remained. We have nothing left to lose, and they are the only ones who have not yet been touched by this war. The silence that followed was different from the silence of the void. This was the silence of beings who had run out of options, who had exhausted every alternative, and who now faced a truth they could no longer avoid. "Very well," Shareth said at last. "You will go, Elder Vethkalen. You spoke against their dismissal 12 cycles ago, when the rest of us laughed. Perhaps they will remember that." I had not spoken against it. I had remained silent, as I had remained silent in so many moments when speaking might have mattered. But I did not correct her. I simply bowed, accepting the burden of a mission I did not believe could succeed. 3 days later, I departed for Earth. The journey took 11 days at maximum fold velocity. 11 days to cross the distance between the dying heart of the galaxy and the quiet arm where humanity had made its home. 11 days of silence, of meditation, of reviewing everything I knew about the species I was being sent to beg. They had achieved faster-than-light travel 312 standard cycles ago, a blink of an eye by Thessary standards. In that time, they had established colonies on 47 worlds, built a modest fleet of exploratory and defensive vessels, and developed trade relationships with 3 of the smaller conclave species. Their technology was functional but unremarkable. Their military capabilities were, by our assessments, barely sufficient to defend their own systems against a determined attack. They had nothing that could stand against the Rokthan. And yet, as my ship dropped out of fold space at the edge of their solar system, I felt that same tremor of unease I had felt 12 years before, watching Sarah Chen walk calmly out of the conclave chamber. The humans did not send a welcome. They sent a query, a simple automated signal requesting identification and purpose. When I provided both, there was a pause of several minutes before a response came. Proceed to coordinates 7 Alpha 3. Maintain current velocity. You will be met. That was all. No ceremony. No escort of honor. No acknowledgement of the fact that I was the highest-ranking Thessary official to ever visit their world. Just instructions, delivered with the efficiency of a traffic control system.
I followed them. The station they directed me to was unremarkable. A cylinder of metal and composite, rotating slowly to provide artificial gravity, bristling with antennae and docking ports. It was functional, efficient, entirely without aesthetic consideration. Compared to the soaring spires of Thessara Prime or the crystalline galleries of Valanthe space, it looked like something a child might have built.
But as I approached, I noticed details that troubled me. The docking ports were designed to accommodate ships far larger than any I had seen in human space. The hull, beneath its plain exterior, showed the distinctive scarring of weapons testing, not the delicate precision of laboratory development, but the brutal efficiency of live fire exercises. And the station's orbit was not random. It was positioned precisely at the gravitational balance point between Earth and its moon, anchored so firmly that moving it would require force sufficient to shift the moon itself. They had built it here for a reason. I just could not understand what that reason was. When I docked, I was met by a single human. He was tall for his species, with gray hair and a face lined by years of experience I could not begin to imagine. He wore a simple uniform, navy blue, unadorned except for a small symbol on his chest that I did not recognize. He did not smile. He did not offer any of the elaborate greetings I had come to expect from species seeking to impress their guests. He simply extended his hand. "Elder Vethkalen," he said. "I'm Admiral Marcus Webb. Welcome to Sentinel Station." I took his hand, felt the strange warmth of human skin, the careful control in his grip, firm enough to demonstrate strength, gentle enough to avoid causing discomfort. It was, I realized, a gesture of remarkable precision, a message in itself. "Thank you, Admiral," I replied. "I appreciate your willingness to receive me." "You've come a long way," he said. "We've been following the news from the Galactic Core. It's not good." "No," I admitted, "it is not." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Let's walk. There's someone who wants to speak with you." The corridors of Sentinel Station were as unremarkable as its exterior. Plain metal walls, functional lighting, occasional humans passing in small groups, their conversations dying away as they noticed me, their eyes following with expressions I could not interpret. Curiosity? Suspicion? I could not tell. "I must confess," I said as we walked, "I was surprised by the lack of response to our communications. The Conclave has sent numerous requests for dialogue. None have been answered." Admiral Webb did not slow his pace. They were received, but not answered. "No." I waited for elaboration that did not come. The silence stretched between us, uncomfortable in a way that galactic diplomacy rarely allowed. Among the elder species, silence was always filled with pleasantries, with inquiries, with the endless dance of words that allowed us to avoid saying anything of substance until we were ready. The humans, it seemed, did not dance. "May I ask why?" I finally ventured. Webb stopped walking. For a long moment he stood still, his back to me, and I saw the tension in his shoulders, the weight of something he was carrying, something he was deciding whether to share. "Elder Vethkalen," he said quietly, "do you remember what happened when we asked to join the Conclave?" Yes, I was present." "Then ye remember the laughter." It was not a question. "I do," I said. He turned to face me, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes beyond the controlled calm of a military officer. It was old, that something. Old and deep and patient. "We came to you with open hands," he said. We had heard stories of the great civilizations of the galaxy, the wisdom of the Thessari, the beauty of the Volanthi worlds, the ancient knowledge of the Kreth. We came hoping to learn, to contribute, to find our place among the stars. He paused, and you laughed at us.
Admiral Webb, do you know what Sarah Chen said when she returned from that chamber?
I shook my head. Nothing. Webb's voice was soft, almost gentle. She said nothing. She walked onto her ship, returned to Earth, and submitted her resignation. She never spoke publicly about what happened again. But her report, he shook his head, her report told us everything we needed to know.
And what was that?
That we would never be welcome. He met my eyes, and I saw in his gaze the weight of a species' quiet fury, not hot anger, but something colder, something that had been folded and refolded until it became as hard as diamond. That no matter how far we advanced, how much we achieved, how many centuries we proved ourselves, we would always be the primitives, the children, the ones who arrived too late to matter. Admiral, So we stopped asking, he said. We stopped sending embassies. We stopped requesting trade agreements and technology exchanges and all the things we had hoped to share. We went home, Elder Vethkalen. We closed our borders, strengthened our defenses, and focused on building something for ourselves. He turned and began walking again. We decided that if the galaxy didn't want us, we would be ready for the day when the galaxy needed us. I followed him in silence, my mind racing.
And now that day has come, I said.
Has it? He glanced back at me. We've received your communications, requests for aid, warnings about the Vrakthan advance, pleas for assistance from species that wouldn't give us the time of day 12 years ago. He shook his head. Forgive me, Elder, but from where I stand, it sounds less like the galaxy needs us and more like the galaxy has run out of other options.
That is not inaccurate, I admitted.
Webb nodded. At least you're honest about it. That's more than I expected. We reached a door at the end of the corridor. It slid open silently, revealing a conference room beyond. Plain, functional, with a single long table and chairs arranged around it. At the far end, standing with her back to us as she studied a holographic display of the galaxy, was a woman I recognized. 12 years older, gray now streaking her dark hair, lines of age and experience carved into features that I remembered as young.
Sarah Chen. She did not turn when we entered.
For a long moment, she simply stood there, her eyes fixed on the display, on the red markers that showed the Vrakthan advance, the blackened zones where civilizations had once flourished, the shrinking island of light that represented everything that remained of galactic civilization.
Elder Vethkalen, she said finally. It's been a long time. Counselor Chen. I inclined my head, though she could not see the gesture. I am honored that you agreed to meet with me. I am not a counselor anymore. She turned at last, and I saw in her face the same quiet control I remembered from the conclave chamber, the same calm, the same unreadable patience. I'm just an advisor now, someone they call when they need perspective from the old days. The old days? I repeated. You speak as if centuries have passed. For humans, 12 years is a significant portion of a lifetime. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. We don't have the luxury of thinking in millennia. No, I said. I suppose you don't. She gestured to the chairs. Please, sit. You've come a long way, and I imagine you have a great deal to say. I sat. Admiral Webb took a position by the door, his arms crossed, his expression still unreadable. Chen remained standing, her eyes moving between me and the display as if calculating something I could not see. "I will be direct," I said. "The Thasari Concordance is dying. The Vrakthan have consumed 47 of our worlds. Our fleets are broken. Our allies are scattered or destroyed. Within 20 cycles, we estimate they will reach the Sara Prime itself." I paused, forcing myself to continue. "We have come to ask for your help."
Jen nodded slowly.
"Help?" "Yes." "What kind of help?" I blinked.
Any kind. Ships, weapons, strategic assistance. We are willing to offer anything in exchange. Technology, resources, territory. Name your price and we will pay it."
"Interesting." She walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat across from me. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate, as if she had all the time in the universe. "Tell me, Elder, in your assessment, what can humanity offer that the great powers of the galaxy could not?"
It was a fair question, a cutting one. "I do not know," I admitted. "Your technology, while impressive for such a young species, is not equal to what the Velanthi or the Kreth could field. Your fleets are modest. Your population is a fraction of what the Concordance could mobilize." I hesitated. "But you are here. You are untouched, and every other option has failed."
Chen studied me for a long moment. "Honesty," she said. "That's unexpected."
"I am too old for deception, Counselor. The time for games has passed." "Has it?" She leaned forward. "Let me ask you something, Elder. 12 years ago, when your conclave dismissed us as primitives, what did you think would happen to humanity?" I did not think of it at all, if I am being honest. We had larger concerns. "Of course you did." Chen's voice was soft, but there was an edge beneath it, a blade wrapped in silk. "You had empires to manage, wars to prevent, the great wheel of galactic civilization to maintain." She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Humanity was beneath your notice, a footnote, a curiosity." "Yes," I said, "we were wrong." "Were you?" She stood, walked back to the display, and touched a control. The image shifted, zooming in on a small cluster of stars at the edge of the spiral arm. "This is human space. 47 colony worlds, 12 billion people, a fleet of—" She paused, glancing at Webb. 342 vessels he supplied. As of this morning. 342 vessels, Chen repeated, against the Vrakthan fleet, which our intelligence estimates at over 60,000 ships and growing. She turned to face me. "By any reasonable calculation, Elder, we should be even less relevant to this war than we were to your conclave." "And yet you survived," I said. "You are here, intact, while civilizations 100 times your strength have fallen." "Yes," she nodded slowly. "We are. And have you asked yourself why?" I had not. The thought had not even occurred to me. Humanity was distant. Humanity was primitive. Humanity had simply been lucky enough to be far from the front lines. But as I looked at Sarah Chen, at the quiet confidence in her eyes, at the careful control in every movement, I felt that tremor of unease again, stronger now, impossible to ignore. "Why?" I asked. Chen smiled. "Because 12 years ago, when your conclave laughed at us, we learned something important. We learned that the galaxy would never protect us, that no matter how advanced we became, how much we contributed, how loudly we called for help, we would always be alone." She turned back to the display. "So we stopped calling. We stopped reaching out. We stopped hoping someone else would save us."
And instead?
Instead, we saved ourselves. She touched another control and the display changed.
I stared at it. I did not understand what I was seeing.
The image showed human space, the same cluster of stars I had seen before, but now it was different. Now I could see the infrastructure that surrounded each world, each station, each orbital platform, not the modest defenses I had expected. Something else entirely. Rings of shipyards encircled every major planet. Not dozens of ships under construction, thousands. Weapons platforms orbited in dense formations, their power signatures suggesting capabilities far beyond anything in our assessments. And buried deep in the asteroid fields, hidden in the shadows of moons and the coronae of stars, I saw the unmistakable signatures of military installations on a scale I had never imagined possible.
"This is impossible," I whispered.
"Is it?" Webb spoke from the door, his voice calm. "We've had 300 years to build, Elder, and for the last 12, we've done nothing else. But the resources required, the industrial capacity." "We're efficient," Chen said. "When you don't waste time on politics, on trade negotiations, on pleasing species that consider you beneath notice, you'd be amazed what you can accomplish."
I looked at the display, trying to make sense of the numbers, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with everything I thought I knew.
"How many ships?" I asked. Chen glanced at Webb. "As of this morning," he said, "the United Earth Fleet consists of 47,000 vessels, combat-ready, fully armed, crewed by personnel who have trained for this moment their entire lives." 47,000. More than the combined fleets of every remaining conclave species. "That is not possible," I said, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Your population cannot support such a military, the logistics alone." "We've made some adjustments to how we approach logistics," Chen said, "and to how we approach a lot of other things. When survival is the only priority, you'd be surprised what becomes possible." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I began to understand. The humans had not been hiding in the darkness, licking their wounds and waiting to be noticed. They had not been sulking in their distant corner of the galaxy, hoping for a chance to prove themselves. They had been building, quietly, patiently, relentlessly. While the great powers of the galaxy laughed at them, while the conclave dismissed them as irrelevant, while species that had existed for millennia continued their ancient games of diplomacy and war, the humans had been preparing. For this, for the day when everything else failed. "Why did you not tell us?" I asked. "Why did you not reveal this capacity? You could have joined the war months ago, when there was still time to—" "To what?" Chen's voice cut through my words like a blade. "To save the species that laughed at us? To sacrifice our people for civilizations that told us we would never be welcome among them?" She shook her head. "Elder, you came here asking for help, but I need you to understand something before we go any further." "What is that?" "We are not doing this for you." She stepped closer, and I saw in her eyes a depth of resolve that I had never seen in any species, in any being, in all my 400 years of service. "We are not doing this because we forgive the conclave, or because we want to be accepted, or because we hope to win your approval. We are doing this because the Vrakthan are a threat to all life in the galaxy, including us. And because we decided 12 years ago that if the galaxy would not protect us, we would protect ourselves." "And if protecting yourselves means protecting the rest of us as well?" "Then you're lucky," she said simply, "because we don't leave people behind, not even people who left us behind first." She returned to the display, her fingers moving across the controls. The image shifted again, showing tactical projections, fleet movements, strategic analyses I could not begin to follow.
"We have been tracking the Vrakthen since their first appearance," she said. "We have studied their tactics, their technology, their patterns of advance. We know more about them than any species in the galaxy because we have been watching while everyone else has been dying."
"And what have you learned?"
"That they can be beaten." She looked at me. "Not easily, not quickly, not without cost, but they are not invincible. They have weaknesses, patterns that can be exploited, vulnerabilities that can be targeted." She paused. "We have been developing countermeasures for the past 11 months. We believe we are ready."
"Ready for what?"
Shen smiled, and for the first time there was something genuine in it. Something fierce and bright and terrifying.
"To show them what humanity can do." The next 3 days passed in a blur of briefings, negotiations, and preparations. I was not the only alien on Sentinel Station now. The humans had allowed a small delegation from the remaining conclave species to join us, the battered survivors of civilizations that had once ruled the stars. Counselor Sherith was there, her mandibles clicking nervously as she reviewed the tactical projections. Luminary Vast floated in his life support sphere, his bioluminescence dim with exhaustion and fear. Even a representative of the Kreth had come, a crystalline being whose name was beyond my ability to pronounce, who observed everything in silence and offered no opinion. We were refugees, supplicants. And the humans treated us with a courtesy that was almost painful. They did not gloat. They did not remind us of our past arrogance or demand apologies for the way we had treated them. They simply shared their plans, asked for our input, and listened carefully to whatever knowledge we could provide about the Vrakthen and the tactics that had failed against them. It was, I realized, a kind of mercy. One we did not deserve. On the third day, Admiral Webb summoned us to the observation deck, a wide, curved chamber with transparent walls that looked out upon the Earth below. The planet hung in the darkness like a jewel, blue and green and white, achingly beautiful against the infinite black. "We launch in 6 hours," Webb said. "The operation will proceed in 3 phases. Phase 1, fleet elements will engage Vrakthen advance forces in the Thesari outer systems, drawing their attention and disrupting their coordination. Phase 2, strike teams will penetrate Vrakthen-controlled space and deploy targeted countermeasures against their command infrastructure. Phase 3, he paused, his expression grim. Phase 3 is what we've been building toward for 12 years. The full commitment of the United Earth Fleet. 47,000 ships, I said, against 60,000 Vrakthen. Against 83,000, according to our latest estimates, Webb corrected. They've been growing faster than projected. I felt the weight of those numbers press down upon me. Admiral, I must ask, do you believe this can succeed? Webb did not answer immediately. He stood before the observation window, his silhouette dark against the glow of his homeworld, and for a long moment he simply looked out at the stars. Elder Vethkalen, he said finally, humanity has always been outnumbered. We have always been outmatched. Every war in our history, every crisis, every moment when extinction seemed certain, we have faced enemies larger than ourselves and somehow found a way to survive. He turned to face me. Do I believe this can succeed? I believe it has to. Because if it doesn't, everything we are, everything we've built, everything we've survived to become, it all ends. And we don't accept that. You speak of survival, Sherith said, her voice bitter. We have survived for millennia. It was not enough. No, Webb agreed. It wasn't. because you survived by being powerful, by being advanced, by being so far above your enemies that they could never touch you. He shook his head. That's not survival, that's dominance. And dominance ends the moment something more dominant comes along.
Then what is survival?
Endurance. Webb's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of something ancient, something forged in fires I could not imagine. Survival is endurance. It's getting knocked down and standing back up. It's losing everything and still finding a reason to keep fighting. It's being broken over and over again and discovering that you're still here, still moving, still refusing to die.
He smiled, and there was something terrible in that smile. Something that made me understand for the first time why the humans had frightened me from the moment I arrived.
We've been doing that for 10,000 years, he said. Long before we reached the stars, long before we knew you existed. We learned it on our own, in the darkness, before we had anyone to teach us. He turned back to the window. Now let us show you what that looks like.
The battle began at the edge of the Thessara system.
I watched it from the command deck of the Sentinel, the flagship of the United Earth Fleet, a vessel so vast that its bridge alone could have housed my entire diplomatic shuttle. The holographic display showed the tactical situation in real time. The approaching Rakthan fleet, a dark swarm of 63,000 vessels sweeping toward the remnants of Thessari space like a wave of annihilation. And rising to meet them, the United Earth Fleet. They emerged from fold space in perfect synchronization. Not a scattered arrival, not a gradual assembly, but a single coordinated emergence that placed 47,000 ships in combat formation within seconds. I had seen fleets gather for battle before. I had watched the great armadas of the Concordance assemble over the course of days, each vessel finding its place in the ancient dance of formation and maneuver. This was nothing like that. This was a machine.
All fleet elements report ready, a calm voice announced. Phase 1 commencing.
The forward elements of the human fleet surged toward the Rakthan, and I expected to see the same desperate, doomed assault that had claimed so many ships before. The Rakthan were implacable, their shields were impenetrable, their weapons carved through even the most advanced armor as if it were paper.
But the human ships did not close to conventional engagement range. Instead, they launched. Thousands of smaller craft, drones, I realized, unmanned weapons platforms, streamed from the human formation like a swarm of insects. They moved with a coordination that seemed impossible, each one adjusting its trajectory in real time, responding to the movements of the Rakthan fleet as if guided by a single vast intelligence.
The Rakthan weapons fire was devastating. Hundreds of drones were destroyed in the first seconds of engagement, their small forms vaporizing in bursts of light.
But there were thousands. And they did not stop coming. Target analysis complete, the calm voice announced. Countermeasure deployment in progress. I watched as the first drones reached the Rakthan formation and detonated, not with conventional explosions, but with something else entirely, something that rippled through Rakthan shields as if they were not there, that targeted the dark ships with impossible precision, that struck at frequencies and wavelengths no weapon I had ever seen could achieve. Rakthan ships began to die. Not one or two, not a token few to demonstrate that resistance was possible. Then thousands.
How is this possible? Sheriff's voice was barely a whisper. Their shields.
are based on energy dispersion, Admiral Webb said, his eyes fixed on the display. They redirect incoming energy, distribute it across their hull, make it harmless. It's effective against conventional weapons, against anything that tries to overpower them with raw force. He smiled. We don't use raw force. We use resonance.
Resonance?
Every physical system has natural frequencies, vibrations that, if properly targeted, can cause catastrophic failure even with minimal input. We've spent 12 years mapping the resonant frequencies of Vrakthan technology, their shields, their weapons, their power systems. He nodded toward the display, where the Vrakthan formation was beginning to fragment, ships drifting as their systems failed. Now we're playing their song. I watched in silence as the battle unfolded. It was not a battle in any sense I understood. There was no noble clash of fleets, no desperate exchange of broadsides, no heroic last stands or dramatic sacrifices. There was only the relentless, patient, systematic destruction of an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. The humans did not fight like warriors. They fought like surgeons.
Every strike was calculated. Every movement was purposeful. When the Vrakthan attempted to regroup, human forces were already in position to cut off their retreat. When they tried to target the drone carriers, human warships intercepted with shields and countermeasures that seemed to anticipate every attack before it came.
And through it all, the calm voice continued to announce updates in a tone that never wavered.
Vrakthan fleet at 72% operational capacity. Phase 1 objectives achieved. Advancing to Phase 2. Vrakthan command vessels identified. Strike teams deploying. Vrakthan fleet at 58% operational capacity. Countermeasure effectiveness exceeding projections. I thought of the battles I had witnessed before, the desperate struggles where our fleets had thrown themselves against the Vrakthan advance, had fought with everything they had, and had still been swept aside like dust before a storm. The humans were not fighting like that. The humans were not even breathing hard. The battle lasted 14 hours. By the end, the Vrakthan fleet had been reduced to less than 12,000 vessels, scattered and disorganized, fleeing toward the galactic rim with human forces in pursuit. The Sarah Prime had been saved, not just defended, but secured, with a ring of human warships now standing guard around my species' homeworld. I stood on the observation deck of the Sentinel, looking down at the planet I had thought I would never see again, and I wept. I did not try to hide my tears. There was no dignity left in pretending to be unmoved. Everything I had believed about the universe, about power, about wisdom, about the natural order of civilizations, had been shattered in the course of a single day. Elder Veth Kalen. I turned. Sarah Chen stood behind me, her uniform rumpled, her face lined with exhaustion. She had been on the bridge throughout the battle, coordinating operations, making decisions that affected millions of lives. And yet she had come here, to this quiet space, to speak with me.
"Counselor," I said.
I told you, I'm not a counselor anymore.
Then what should I call you?
She considered this. Sarah is fine. I nodded slowly. Sarah, I do not have words for what I witnessed today, what your people have done. We did what was necessary. She came to stand beside me, looking out at the planet below. Nothing more, nothing less. How can you speak of it so calmly? You have achieved what no species in the galaxy could accomplish. You have turned back an enemy that consumed civilizations 1,000 times more powerful than your own.
I know. She was quiet for a moment. That's the point, Elder. That's why we're calm. Because we always knew we would have to do this eventually. She glanced at me. When you've spent centuries being dismissed, being underestimated, being told that you'll never matter, you either accept it or you prove them wrong. We chose to prove them wrong.
By saving us all. By saving ourselves, she corrected gently. The rest of you just happened to be here. I wanted to argue. I wanted to insist that there was something noble in their actions, something that transcended mere survival, something that proved humanity was worthy of the respect they had always sought.
But I could not find the words.
Because she was right. They had not done this for us. They had not done this for glory or recognition or the gratitude of the galaxy. They had done this because it was necessary, because the alternative was extinction, because they had learned long ago that the only being you could truly rely on was yourself. And in that simple truth, I saw something that my species had never understood. We had built empires. We had crafted treaties. We had stood at the center of galactic civilization for 9,000 years, confident in our wisdom, secure in our power, certain that we had mastered the art of survival.
But we had never truly been tested.
Not like this. Not in the way that humanity had been tested over and over again since before they even left their own world. We had laughed at them because they were young, because they were small, because they had not yet achieved the monuments of glory that we considered the measure of a civilized species. We had not understood that their youth was their strength, that their smallness had forced them to be efficient, that their lack of monuments meant they had nothing to lose and everything to fight for. They were not the children we had dismissed. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. The war did not end with the Battle of Thesara Prime. The Vrakthin had been broken, not destroyed. Their remaining forces fled into the darkness between galaxies, licking wounds they had never expected to receive. Human pursuit fleets followed, hunting them across the void, ensuring that they could never regroup, never rebuild, never threaten galactic civilization again. It took 3 years to finish the job. 3 years of patient, relentless pursuit. 3 years of battles in the empty spaces between stars where no other species could follow. 3 years of humanity proving over and over again that they would not stop until the threat was truly eliminated. When it was over, the galaxy was a different place. The great powers had fallen. The Villanthi were reduced to a handful of colony worlds, their empire a memory. The Kreth had retreated into their crystalline cores, speaking to no one, processing their trauma in ways we could not understand. The Oraveth were scattered, their psionic networks broken, their culture fragmented beyond recognition. And the Thessary Concordance. We survived. Barely. 18 worlds remained of the 47 we had once ruled. 4 billion of my people lived on, a fraction of the population we had once commanded. Our fleets were gone, our infrastructure shattered, our ancient institutions reduced to administrative outposts, struggling to maintain basic order. But we survived. Because humanity had saved us? Not because they wanted to. Not because they forgave us. Not because they believed we deserved a second chance. Because they refused to leave anyone behind.
even those who had left them behind first. 10 years after the war, I returned to Earth. I was old now, old even by Thessery standards, 437 cycles, and I could feel the weight of every one of them in my bones. I had been invited to a ceremony marking the anniversary of humanity's entry into galactic affairs, a formal acknowledgement of their new role as the dominant power in known space.
The irony was not lost on me.
The ceremony was held in a vast amphitheater on the surface of Earth, overlooking an ocean that stretched to the horizon. Thousands of beings were gathered, humans, of course, but also representatives of every surviving species in the galaxy. The Thesari delegation was small, modest, appropriate to our reduced circumstances. We sat where we were directed and waited our turn to speak.
But first, Sarah Chen took the stage.
She was old now, too. Old for a human. Her hair was white, her movements slower than I remembered, her voice softer. But her eyes were the same quiet patience, the same unshakable calm.
When I was young, she said, I represented humanity before the conclave of voices. I asked for nothing more than a chance to join the galactic community, to learn from those who had come before us, to find our place among the stars. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled crowd. I was laughed at. We were told in no uncertain terms that we would never be welcome, that we were primitive, that we did not matter.
The silence in the amphitheater was absolute.
We could have accepted that judgment, she continued. We could have retreated, sulked, abandoned our hopes of ever being taken seriously. We could have resigned ourselves to insignificance, waiting for the day when the greater powers of the galaxy decided our fate for us. She shook her head. We chose differently. We chose to build, to prepare, to make ourselves ready for whatever the future might bring. And when that future arrived, when the Vrachthen came, when the great powers fell, when the galaxy stood on the brink of annihilation, we were ready. She looked down at her hands, weathered and lined with age. I am not here to claim credit for what humanity has achieved. That credit belongs to the billions of people who worked, sacrificed, and died to make this possible. Engineers who built our ships, scientists who developed our weapons, soldiers who gave their lives in the darkness between stars. She looked up again. I am here to say something I should have said 12 years ago, when I walked out of that conclave chamber in silence.
I held my breath.
You were wrong about us, she said simply. Not because we proved ourselves more powerful than you expected, not because we built fleets larger than yours, or developed weapons more advanced, or conquered enemies you could not defeat. You were wrong because you believed that strength was measured in millennia of history, in monuments of ancient glory, in the accumulated power of civilizations that had existed since before our sun was born. But that is not strength, she said. That is comfort. That is the illusion of security that comes from having never truly been tested. You believed you were eternal because nothing had ever threatened your eternity. And when that threat finally came, you discovered that all your wisdom, all your power, all your ancient certainties were not enough. Humanity is not strong because we are old. We are not strong because we built empires or conquered stars. We are strong because we have been broken again and again and again, and we have survived. Because we learned in the darkness of our own world that the only thing you can truly rely on is your refusal to give up. She raised her head,
and in her eyes I saw the fire that had burned in human hearts since before they left their caves.
We do not ask for your gratitude. We do not seek your worship. We do not demand that you acknowledge our superiority or bow before our achievements. We ask only that you remember this moment, that you remember what it cost to survive, that you remember the silence that followed your laughter, and what we built in that silence. Because the next time the galaxy faces extinction, we will be here. We will be ready, and we will not leave you behind.
She stepped back from the podium, and the amphitheater erupted in sound, applause, cheers, the clicking of Valenthi mandibles, and the chiming of Kreth crystals, and the bioluminescent flashes of Arivith approval.
But I did not join them.
I sat in my seat, looking at the woman who had walked out of the conclave chamber in silence 12 years ago, who had returned home and told her people that they would never be welcome among the stars, who had set in motion the quiet revolution that would save us all.
And I understood, at last, the meaning of that silence.
When the council had laughed, humanity had not responded with anger or argument or wounded pride. They had not pleaded their case or demanded recognition or sought to prove their worth through words. They had simply gone quiet. And in that quiet, they had built something the galaxy had never seen before. A species forged in struggle, tempered by hardship, made strong not by ancient wisdom or superior technology, but by the simple, relentless refusal to accept defeat.
We had laughed at them because we did not understand what we were seeing.
We did not understand that their silence was not submission. It was patience. The patience of a species that had learned over 10,000 years of suffering that the only way to prove your worth was to wait for the moment when words no longer mattered. And when that moment came, when the laughter ended and the screaming began, they had been ready. I died 7 cycles later, on a quiet evening on my homeworld, looking up at the stars. I was not afraid. I had lived long enough to see the galaxy reborn, to watch humanity take its place among the great civilizations of known space, to witness the dawn of an era in which no species would ever again be dismissed because of their youth or their size or their unfamiliar ways.
In the darkness above me, I could see the lights of human ships, patrol vessels, guardian fleets, the silent protectors of a peace that would last for centuries to come.
And in my final moments, I found myself remembering the words Sarah Chen had spoken so many years ago, when I asked why humanity had come to our rescue.
We don't leave people behind, she had said, not even people who left us behind first.
I smiled, feeling the warmth of that truth settle into my bones as the cold of death crept closer.
They had been wrong about so many things, my people. But we had learned. In the silence that followed our laughter, we had finally learned to listen. And what we heard, what the entire galaxy heard, was the sound of a species that would not be broken, would not be silenced, would not be stopped. The stars grew dim above me, and the last thing I saw before the darkness took me was the pale blue glow of Earth's distant sun, a small yellow star at the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm around which orbited a pale blue world. The world that had taught us all what it truly meant to survive. The world that had answered our laughter with silence.
And our silence with salvation.